But things are changing. The population's increased a lot out here, the workforce has increased, and half our manufacturing jobs have been shut down and moved off to other countries, as I'm sure many of you would know. So increasingly people in this part of town are getting jobs in the city centre. Now, you don't have to be Albert Einstein when someone says to you, if we can't fit all the people trying to drive into the city centre on the Westgate Bridge, is there any other way in which you could transport people into the inner city? Say the city centre in that part of town served by the underground rail loop built at enormous expense 20 years ago. Well, in every competently run city in the world, they never try and get everyone into the city centre in cars. You know why? Because 300,000 people work in that couple of square kilometres, and if they all brought a car with them, well, if you just parked all the cars, it would occupy 3 times the area of the central business district of Melbourne. There just isn't room for us all to bring our cars. So why don't we try and encourage people to make the trip by public transport? Well, this is the point at which I thought I'd better do some field work, so I came out here by public transport. All the way, I got off the bus across the road just over there. There you see. Yes. I can tell that none of you did it because I was the only one that got off the bus when it stopped here. But I don't blame you, because people are often saying, why don't people use public transport more in Melbourne? Well, my question really, when people ask me that, is why does anyone use public transport? It's so terrible. I went down to Museum Station, which is called something else now, from RMIT, to catch the 6:18 train to Sydenham, and got down onto the platform, and the train before it had been cancelled, and the one before that was so late that it was actually coming after the Sydenham train. Terribly confusing. The whole platform was a sea of people. I thought someone was going to fall in front of the train, and this is after 6 p.m. Now, of course, our government tells us, oh, but we've enormously increased public transport services. Well, I'm so old that I've got the Sydenham line train timetable from 10 years ago. Still got it. It was called the St Albans line then. Some of the very elderly in you may remember that. In peak hour, there were 4 train services on the St Albans line 10 years ago. Since that time, we've had Carolyn Springs, we've had all the development at the back of St Albans and Sydenham, we've had all the extra people working in the city centre because there are no jobs locally anymore. There are now 5 trains in peak hour. So we've had 1 extra train put on in 10 years. That doesn't sound very good. So do you know what they do? They say, oh, well, it's really 2, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. And since there's 5 days in the week, we'll multiply it by 5. 2 times 5 is 10. We put an extra 10 trains a week on. Sounds better that way, doesn't it? But actually, all that's happened is 1 train, for goodness sake. Now, why is it, I hear you ask, that they can't run more than 5 trains an hour on the Sydenham line when, for example, there's a train every 3 minutes on the Ringwood line, and 80 years ago, there was a train every 3 minutes out to Sandringham in peak hour and out to Essendon in peak hour. Why can't they do it? Oh, well, they say, we've got all these country trains that come through Sunshine, and what we need is some extra tracks to enable them to pass the suburban trains before they get to Footscray, because it's terribly confusing with the country trains and the suburban trains on the same tracks. So what we need to do is spend billions and billions of dollars, because what we need is 4 tracks between Sunshine and Footscray. We need an underground rail line under Footscray Station for country trains, and then we need either a bridge or a tunnel across the Maribyrnong River to carry those train lines into the city. Well, next time you're taking the train into the city, can I suggest that you sit on the left-hand side and look out the window? Because if, as you go through West Footscray and Middle Footscray, you'll notice that there are in fact 2 extra tracks next to the existing suburban tracks. And once you get to West Footscray, blow me down, they go down into a tunnel under Footscray. That tunnel goes under a street called Bunbury Street and comes out the other side. It's been there since 1928. It's going to celebrate its 80th anniversary in a month's time. And yet, Connex and the government in Eddington tell us that we couldn't possibly squeeze 1 more train onto the Sydenham line until we've got something that's been there for 80 years. And the other thing you'll notice if you're travelling along a train in peak hour looking out the window at these extra tracks is that there'll be nothing on them because they're used by a couple of freight trains a day, they're used by the train to Sydney, which runs twice a day, and the other train to Adelaide, which runs 3 times a week. Sad story. There's plenty of room to run the extra trains there, so why aren't they doing it? Well, I haven't got time to tell you about that because I haven't finished my story yet, because of course eventually I get on the train, stand all the way to Sunshine, by this time 6:30. My train is due in at 6:38 and it actually gets in on time, funnily enough. It was all the other ones around it that were late and cancelled, so I did well. There's a bus, of course, that runs out here, runs every 20 minutes just like the train does, and it's timed to miss every train all day long, 7 days a week, 365 days a year in both directions. So the train's due in at 6:38, and I'm reading this from the timetable. I wouldn't want you to think I was making it up. Train's due in at 6:38. The bus is due to leave at 10 to 7. That's 12 minutes later. In fact, the bus turned up late, quite an achievement at that time of night with no passengers around. And so, in fact, the bus left at 5 to 7. That's 3 minutes before the next train from the city gets in. I don't know whether the driver actually waits until he can see the train approaching and then leaves. To be fair on the driver, it's not his problem. It's the people down at the government who are supposed to be in charge of this. So even when the train and the bus run every 20 minutes, they never meet up with each other anyway. And if any of you have had the mispleasure of ever actually making that connection, it was funny. I get off the train, we go down the subway into the urine-sodden underpass, and everyone turns left except me and 3 rather dishevelled-looking people. They're all going to the car park to drive home, of course, and us poor sad ones are going the other way to try and find the bus stop. And where is the bleeding bus stop? I get up the top of the thing and there's this huge thing, pitch darkness. There's about 20 bus bays, which is the one for the one that go for route 454. Well, there's no sign, no nothing. I just had to approach them one after another. Then I realised why they have to make you wait quarter of an hour for the bus to come. It takes you quarter of an hour to work out which stop to go for. Eventually I get there and in pitch darkness, in the freezing cold with the wind biting in, wait there with 3 people who are immediately, obviously, recently arrived refugees, and you kind of think, haven't they suffered enough already? They come here from a war-torn country and then they have to use our public transport system. So eventually the bus turns up and the 4 of us chug down here and I get off and come here and God knows where the other poor 3 benighted people are going. So when we ask ourselves why people aren't using public transport,